Hi, I'm Sasha and welcome to my Safer at Home kitchen. The coronavirus has us all doing our part to flatten the curve, so what a better time to try out a new recipe at home than right now. Joining me is my friend Corona Light. If there's ever a better time for me to enjoy a Corona Light besides the time that my sister and I used to drink them while washing our cars in the driveway and listening to Dave Matthews, this is the time. You might notice that mine's a little pink. I've actually added a little bit of grenadine and of course the lime to enjoy this with. So let us start our cooking. And actually before I start, I'd like to send a shout out and a reminder that as much as a lot of us are cooking more at home these days, we still want to support our local restaurants, because the last thing we need when this thing is all over is to be able to finally go out and there's nowhere to go out to. So when you can, order takeout from your favorite local restaurant, but when you also need to cook at home, this is a great recipe for you to try out. First of all of the ingredients, or the majority of the ingredients that you will see me use today were purchased from my favorite store, let's say it together now, Aldi. Not only the condiments, the chicken meat that we will use, even the tools, from simple things like spatulas and tongs to the air fryer that we will actually cook our meal with today. So what are we cooking? Well, I call it Pickle Chicken Sandwiches. Interesting name. All right, so one of the first things that I want to introduce today before we really start the main cooking is one of the tools that we're going to use to prepare this meal. By now, most of you have probably heard of air fryers. If you don't have one, I'd like to show you today how easy they are to use and how delicious they can make so many different things, but particularly the dish that we're going to cook today. So let me introduce you to my air fryer. Today, you can see in here right now, I have the side dish that we'll be serving with our pickle chicken sandwiches, some crisp cut fries. I simply put these in my air fryer before we started taping. And this air fryer is very simple. You can adjust the cooking time. So in this case, I had originally set it at 10 minutes. You can then adjust the temperature. And for this, it was about 400 degrees. And then you press start and away you go. Typically, you will want to spray the bottom of your air fryer. Now, depending on the type of air fryer you have, will determine the type of spray that it's okay to use. In many air fryers, the aerosol type sprays are not recommended to be used. I have been using my air fryer now for about 6 months and doing a light coating of aerosol spray. It seems to hold up well. That's because it's an Aldi product and it's awesome. So in this application, since we're going to be cooking two different things using the air fryer, I got a jump start on the side dish, our crisp cut fries. And now that they're mostly cooked and they are crisp already, you can kind of see, oops, oh, doggy gets that one, that they have crispy edges on them. Pretty good. But now, because I want them to hold their temperature and to continue crisping, I'm going to pour them in a pan. And these are just going to go hang out in the oven at a really low temp. I've got my oven set at about 200. And these are going to hang out in there while we cook our chicken sandwiches. All right, so before we start making our chicken, we're going to prepare what I think is equally as important a component of the recipe, and that is the sauce that we'll put on our chicken when we're finished. So I'm going to put together a really simple dipping sauce that can go on top of the chicken sandwich. It can go on the side to dip those crisp cut fries in, or if you're like me, you could eat it with a spoon if you really wanted to. So to prepare our dipping sauce, I'm going to use a variety of Aldi condiments. So to make our dipping sauce, we're going to start with some mayo. So you can see here that I have a measuring cup. This recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of mayo. A lot of times when I'm cooking at home, instead of using a measuring cup like this and digging it back out, I set the measuring cup there so that I can kind of eyeball how much that is, and using my cute little scooper from Aldi, I can measure it out that way. And it's a dipping sauce. It doesn't have to be exact. So a way to save a little bit on dishes and to speed things along a little bit more. All right, so a 1/4 cup of mayo goes in there, and then we're gonna use a teaspoon of mustard, just plain old yellow mustard, Berman's brand from the Aldi. And again, I have my measuring spoon here, but I really don't need to measure that into the spoon and drop it into the bowl. I can just squirt a little bit into my bowl here, and looking at that measuring spoon, close enough. Then we're going to use a tablespoon of barbecue sauce. Now you can use whatever barbecue sauce you like. In this case, I'm using my honey barbecue Sweet Baby Ray's. Again, 1 tablespoon, kind of eyeballing that into my bowl, and that looks good. And then finally, the recipe that I'm following actually calls for a tablespoon of honey. I don't happen to have honey. I'm not a huge fan of honey, but I do love the light blue agave syrup. It's one of the Simply Nature organic products from Aldi. So I'm going to be using that. There's not a significant difference in taste. Basically, you're looking for that little sweet note in this dipping sauce, and I think this works just fine. Again, eyeballing 1 tablespoon of the agave into our bowl, and that's that. Also to this, I'm going to add 1 little seasoning, and that is turmeric powder. This is a spice that I also picked up at Aldi. It's available at all major grocery stores and spice aisles. But turmeric has a lot of health properties, and it does have a certain aroma to it that I think would lend itself nicely to this particular sauce. I'm just going to sprinkle in a little bit. Again, if it doesn't have to be an exact science, and to me, when you're making sauces, you start with a basic format of the sauce, and then you taste it, and you add more of things that you want to taste more of, and in some cases, cover up things that you want to taste less of. So I'm just going to mix this together. I'm trying to get everything incorporated. Probably a rectangular container is not the ideal vessel for stirring a sauce. However, it's going to look really pretty when we serve it. All right, so that looks nicely mixed, and I'm going to take a little taste. Actually, that's really, really good. So I'm going to cover this, and we're going to let this hang out in the fridge while we move on to the next part of our recipe, which is the pickled chicken. So now we're going to start preparing our chicken. About halfway through this Corona. It does start to taste better after a little while. All right, so before we started this process, earlier today, I took 2 chicken breasts and put them in a Ziploc bag. It says my son's name on it. And I pounded out the chicken so that each breast was about the same thickness and size. And to the bag, I added a cup of pickle juice. So this is your brine. You can brine your chicken for at least 30 minutes, up to about 8 hours. If you go much farther than that, your chicken will start to kind of take on a weird texture. Also, even though I pounded out the chicken breasts ahead of time, as they sit in the brine, they will plump up a little bit and get nice and juicy. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to drain the pickle juice out of here. I have a silicone mat or cutting board to be able to cut my chicken. And what I want to do is I want to cut pieces of the chicken breast into bun size pieces. So whatever bun you're using, and there's a variety of different shape sizes and thicknesses of buns. Today I'm using just a plain old hamburger bun from the Aldi. You can be fancy and use a brioche bun, but you want to cut your raw pieces of chicken so that they're about the size, maybe a little bit larger than the bun that you're using. So I'm going to set this here as my reference point, and this will be the snack for our cute little puppy later. So I'm going to go and drain this off, and then I'll come back and we'll cut our chicken into the correct size pieces. Okay, so I've drained my pickle juice out of my Ziploc bag, and for our purposes today, I'm only going to make 2 sandwiches, but obviously you would, do this process for the chicken breast for the entire 2 pounds of chicken breast. Also, if you brine 2 pounds of chicken breast or even a pound and don't want to use it all right away, you can go ahead and freeze the remainder of the brine chicken breast and save that for another time. So I'm going to select this guy right here. And you can see that it's plumped up nicely from being in the brine. And using my bun as kind of my guide for how big I want the pieces to be, I'm just going to start making cuts. Now you can also see on this particular breast, there's some what I would like to call undesirable pieces. I'm going to get rid of those. This is a rather large chicken breast, even though it was pounded down. I'm just going to get rid of these little grizzly pieces. I'm kind of picky about my chicken, and I do not want to bite into something that looks like that. Flip this back over, and really for this size bun, I can probably get, just from this one chicken breast, I can probably get 4 sandwiches. Now if you want yours bigger, that's fine. I'm going to go with this size for right now. Now we've cut our pieces and we are ready to begin our breading of the chicken breasts. All right, so next we're going to create the breading for our chicken sandwiches. So anytime you're doing a breading, usually there's the dip, the wash, and then there's your dry ingredients. So for the wet ingredients, I'm going to use 2 whole eggs. And to that, I'm going to add a 1/2 cup of milk. And we're just going to beat those up a little bit. The egg wash part is going to help the dry breading stick to the chicken and hopefully not come off when we put it in the air fryer. Even if you put a plain non-breaded chicken breast in the air fryer, season it up, throw it in there. It comes out so juicy and so delicious. It almost tastes like it's grilled. So even without breading, your chicken will taste delicious. So then in our dry breading, we're going to add a cup of flour, regular all-purpose flour, 2 tablespoons of potato starch. I didn't have potato starch, so I'm going to take my chances and use cornstarch. Some folks said that still worked out fine. It's what I had in my pantry, so we're going to use that. And then one of the secret ingredients of the breading for this is confectioner's sugar. So I also have 2 tablespoons of confectioner's sugar. So with my hands, just going to mix that up a little bit. And then we're going to get to our seasonings. So there's a variety of ways that you can season this. In this particular recipe, it did call for things like paprika, cayenne pepper, celery seed, which I did not have. So the one thing about seasoning food is season it the way that you like it. And so in this case, I'm going to add, I do have paprika, so I'm going to do a teaspoon of paprika. Now with spices, I do tend to measure those unless it's a recipe that I've really grown accustomed to, and then I might just eyeball it. Since I don't have the celery seed, I'm just going to use regular poultry seasoning, and for this I'm just going to use a 1/4 teaspoon because we don't want that too heavy of a flavor. I also ran out of cayenne pepper, so again, we're going to improvise. I do have some great Cajun spice, so I'm going to add that instead for that little bit of heat kick. And then for me, when I'm doing any kind of seasoned chicken, I always use nature's seasoning. This is something that my grandma always used, and it's basically salt, pepper, and garlic powder, but in a nice mixed ratio. So I'm going to add a teaspoon of that as well. Now that does have salt in it, so I'm not going to add any additional salt, but I will also hit it with a few cracks of black pepper. Just to have that pepper flavoring in there as well. I like a little extra pepper flavor. So again, using your fingers, you can kind of mix that together. So, and you just want to make sure that as you're mixing this together, that all the things that you dumped in here are as evenly distributed as possible, so that you have that sort of even flavoring when you bread your chicken. Okay, so now that we have our station ready to go, let's begin to bread our chicken. So we're going to take our chicken piece. We're going to first dip it into the egg and milk mixture. And I like to use a tongs so that my fingers don't get all gunky. If you want to use your fingers, it's your kitchen, that's up to you. And we're just going to turn it around to make sure that every part of the chicken, the sides, the front and back, are covered in the dry mixture. And then you want to shake off any excess, because once you put this in your air fryer, that excess tends to burn. So you want to get as much of that off of there as possible. So shake off the excess, set that on a plate, and it's ready to go in our air fryer. So we're going to do our second piece of chicken. Again, just dipping it in the egg and milk mixture, shake that off a little bit, put it in our dry, make sure everything is coated nicely, kind of press down on it a little bit just to give it an extra chance of sticking once we go to fry. Shake off any excess, and it's ready to take to the air fryer. All right, so now we are ready to air fry our chicken sandwich breast pieces. So we've got our chicken breaded, and before I put the chicken in, I'm just gonna give my air fryer basket another little spray of olive oil spray, and I'm going to place the two pieces inside the air fryer. If you're doing more than two pieces, you just wanna make sure that you don't overcrowd your air fryer. And you also want to spray the tops of the chicken once you put it in the basket. Then this recipe says that we're going to do two things. First of all, because we want to make sure that the chicken cooks all the way through, we're going to cook it first at a lower temperature, so 340 degrees, for 6 minutes on each side. So I'm going to do a total of 12 minutes, and halfway through I'm going to flip those pieces over. So here we go. And then once we're done flipping this over and we've done 6 minutes on each side, we're gonna raise the temperature to 400 degrees, and we're gonna cook it about 2 to 3 minutes on each side. We're gonna kind of feel the chicken, make sure that it feels like it's done. And if it needs to go a little bit longer, we will. You can also use a meat thermometer. That's the best way and the safest way to ensure that your chicken is properly cooked. So we'll let that do its thing, and then after 12 minutes, we'll go ahead and raise that temperature, and we'll let it finish cooking.
Alright, so while we are waiting for the chicken to cook, I am going to make a Corona-rita. Now, we looked at a bunch of recipes online, and they're all a little bit different, so I'm just going to wing it and make it the way that looks good to me. So I'm going to take 2 ounces of tequila, and we are going to put that into a glass full of ice. You don't need a glass this big, but sometimes it helps. Then we're going to take a little orange juice. Going to top it off, not all the way, because we also need a little room for that Corona bottle to go in. You don't want to fill it up all the way, otherwise as soon as you put that in, it's just going to go all over. And it might, who knows. I don't know how big how much I filled it up. And then we're going to take a little bit of grenadine. Nice little color, nice little flavor. Now we're going to take a bottle of Corona. Pop that cap off. Now in one quick fluid motion, we're going to throw it in there upside down. Alright, and then you can see it fills it up, but it won't overfill it. So then you add a lime and a Corona-rita. You're set to go.
Okay, so here we are with our finished product. So our chicken air fried in the air fryer for 6 minutes on each side at a lower temperature of 340. Then we increased the temperature to 400 degrees, and unlike the recipe, it did call for more than 2 minutes on each side at that higher temperature, both to ensure that the chicken was cooked all the way through and to get that crispy exterior. We've also added to our toasted buns a little bit of that dipping sauce that we made. The recipe calls actually for exactly 2 pickles, but we're all being told what to do these days, so I say go for it if you want a third one. So I put a third one on the plate. Also add a little bit of the dipping sauce for our crisp cut fries. And for me, I like a little bit of hot sauce on my chicken. Josh likes his a little milder, so I'm just gonna add a little touch, couple drizzles of hot sauce on mine. And we are ready to try these babies out and see if they taste as good as they look. Cheers. It is actually crispy.
Very good.
Best sauce. Yum. Thank you for joining us in our kitchen today. We hope that you will be inspired to try something new. Also, thank you so much to all of the essential workers out there that are trying to keep things together for all of us, especially our healthcare workers. This goes out to you. Cheers.